Mike for me. Hi, everybody. Steve Cady here at Bowling Green State University, and with the all things change, the Change 2025 series that we have, we're getting close to the end of it. We've had a wonderful group of people here as a part of this, and it's been a great series. And I'm just so grateful that Mike's here with us today. The sponsors of this are our Doctorate in Organization Development and Change program and our Masters in Organization Development and Change program. We have two at BGSU. We also have the Academy of Management's OD&C division sponsoring this, and we do a special at the end asking Mike. We're going to at the end have our deep dive into OD, and we're going to ask you some questions about the field at the very end, and it's always been very enlightening to have those conversations. Mike, you're what I consider an incredibly entrepreneurial academic. You are definitely one of a kind in that way. And Don is here, and Don knows you very well. So I thought, Don, you should give a little introduction to Mike, and then we'll head off with his content.
I had the privilege of meeting Mike when I was fairly new to the field, but got hooked into being the editor of the OD newsletter by Kelly Sarmanakis, and we had our first meeting at Harvard with Michael Beer, and I was just in awe. I have to tell you, I had no idea I would ever be sitting around these luminaries like that. And as I got to know Mike through my career, he really became a role model for me, because he was so well known. His writings were so respected, and yet he was probably one of the nicest human beings I think I had ever met. And I thought, if this is what it means to be an OD, this is for me. And so literally, I kind of modeled my career after Mike, and I wanted to always remind myself that OD is not just about doing, but it's a lot about being. And I know he's impacted a lot of people, obviously, through his achievements and books and articles and that sort of thing, but probably far more so than he ever imagined just by who he is. So I feel very honored that you asked me to do this. I had not really prepared anything. Steve just asked me on the fly to introduce him, but I consider it such a privilege and honor to do so.
Yeah, that's great. Well, thank you, Don.
Thank you. Is it ready? Thank you, Don. I really appreciate that very, very much, and it's been a pleasure to know you. And welcome to everybody else. I'm going to go to get to screen share. I hope.
Yeah, we see your screen. All well.
Okay. Let me now go to where am I here?
Right there, almost there. You were right on it. If you're looking for your PowerPoint,
Yeah.
you go
Okay.
down. You're right down there at the bottom. You were at it right there. You can go down and click on the orange.
Well, I thought I had it on, but let's see
Yeah,
here.
it's right there behind it. It's right there behind. If you just
Yeah,
minimize that.
it's probably behind it.
Yep.
Well,
So if you pull that down, and there you go, and just kind of pull that off. There you go, and you can present.
okay, here we go.
Yeah.
All right. Well, welcome to everybody. I'm glad to be with you, and I'm glad to share some thoughts. There are probably too many slides that I put in here, but I may skip around a little bit, but get to the main point. What I want to talk about now are some ideas that I'm writing about. My next book will be The Effective Organization, and something like overcoming the silent, undiscussable barriers to the development of an effective organization. So, what is it that makes an effective organization? Remember, we often use the word we're going to increase effectiveness. Well, what the hell really is effectiveness? We're going to talk about that based on what we've learned from a methodology they've used that allows truth to speak to power. But I'll get to that in a minute. Let me first introduce this particular quote by Kurt Lewin, because it really applies to me in spades. You can only truly understand organizations by actively trying to change them. It took me, that's exactly how I have learned about organizations. I got a Ph.D. in industrial organization psychology, but took a job at Corning, New York, at Corning Incorporated, then called Corning Glassworks, way back in my early years. I won't tell you just how long ago that was, but something like I've had 50 years of experience in working with organizations, starting with 11 years at Corning, where I was an internal organization development consultant, hired to be the only behavioral scientist in a company, and developed it into a group, an organization research and development group of about 11 or 12 people, and so on. I won't go into the details, but I want you to know that I'm speaking from all the things I'm talking about began years ago with learning how to change organizations. And the way I learned was to have people call me up, and I didn't even know that I was an organization development consultant until somebody called me to ask them to solve some problems they were having. And that's how I began to get into it, trying to experiment and trying to learn how to go about changing organizations. I sure learned one thing. Education itself does not, and training does not change organizations. You need to have a different way of getting, and yet we often do it. We often do too much of it, in my opinion. It's got to be, it works when it's in the context of a real change process where the management has said, we're trying to do this, and then in that area, in that condition, it might work. I'm not saying education is not worthy. I just spent 30 years at the Harvard Business School teaching and doing things, but it doesn't change organizations. And I knew that best when students would come up to me with various executives would come back and say, these are great ideas, but how do I get them into my organization? They didn't, and they began to talk about barriers that would do that. So let me go beyond that. I can't spend time on that, but I do want to go to this view, to this quote from Jim Collins. Whoops, let me get rid of this. How am I going to do this?
Just hit the red dot.
Yeah, okay. There we go. All right. So in his book, How the Mighty Fall and Why Some Companies Never Give In, Collins makes this statement: every institution is vulnerable, according to Jim Collins, no matter how great, no matter how much they've achieved, no matter how much power they've garnered, you're vulnerable to decline. There is no law of nature that the most powerful will inevitably remain at the top. Anyone can fall, and most eventually do. This is a truism that I think we just got to understand. And for that reason, we need to be thinking about a way in which an organization can deal with its vulnerabilities. Now, I'm going to make the basic argument that the vulnerabilities of an organization are embedded in the organization itself. That it is the organization and how it functions or doesn't function that effectively is the vulnerability and adapts. As the environment changes, the organization has to adapt. It's got to get aligned with the environment and a strategic task that is asked to perform. Let me just go forward a little bit. Whoops, what's going on here? Okay, let me just, we know we're living in an ever-changing world, a VUCA world, as the military has defined it. A lot of volatility and unpredictability, more uncertainty. In fact, one of my early experiences at Corning was a general manager coming to me and saying, I've got these all huge problems. He'd just recently taken over the business, and the reason they were having it was because they had entered a much more uncertain environment that their organization arrangements allowed them to deal with that uncertainty. Complexity, intertwining issues, ambiguity. So I'm going to argue that your organization is often too ineffective to cope and adapt to continuous change. And that is just like this general manager back 30, 40 years ago. Your environment is constantly changing. Your strategic task has to change, and your ability to do that is true vulnerability. And the ideas I want to talk to you about started in about 1988 when a general manager, when Ray Martin, the CEO of Becton Dickinson, a global technology company, and his CHRO came to me and said what their problems were. They were particularly having a corporate strategy change, and they were having difficulty implementing it. But he didn't come and ask me, would you come and solve this particular strategic problem we're having? He said, can you help us become an organization capable of implementing its strategy? So that's a different question. It's not help us now, it's help us create a company capable of implementing strategy. That led us to begin to develop a methodology called the strategic fitness process, which enables truth to speak to power. That is, it enables an honest conversation. I'll say more about that later, but it enables what we call an honest, meaning the truth is on the table, collective, meaning it involves other members of the organization through a series of representatives called the task force, which I'll go into later as well, to basically talk about what the organization sees as the problems that are blocking the implementation of strategy. I'm going to now get into this through a particular case example. I'm using this to represent the kind of problems that we have seen over and over again, and what the methodology and what the concept of honest, collective, and public conversation is all about. So, it's quite a few years ago, but maybe 20 years ago, I was giving a presentation talk at Hewlett-Packard Corporate to a bunch of HR people, the key HR people. And after the presentation, a very small, tiny woman ran up to me and said, Mike, we need this. Well, I had just talked about the strategic fitness process and what it was all about. I said, why? And she said to me, these are the kinds of things she said to me, maybe not exactly in the way they listed here. We have two competing strategies that are battling each other for the same resources. The resultant factions around these two strategies are tearing the organization apart. The members of the top team operate in their own silos. They are a group of fiefdoms that refuse to cooperate effectively for fear that they will lose power. Some of this may sound familiar. and some of it may not. There's a Cold War going on between the Research and Development Department and what they call the Custom Systems Department. I don't need to get into the details of this, I don't think, because it just tells you the kind of tearing apart that she was talking about. Our business unit is still not clear about what type of business it wants to be in. I think you probably recognize that one in your organization or some of your organization. Morale is poor and people are leaving for other divisions in the company. In other words, we're not developing the kind of attachment to the organization that we should be. Okay, here is what one of the George Mosby, the finance manager of the company, of this particular business unit. It's a business unit within Hewlett-Packard, which had many, many divisions. And let me say something about this business. This was a division set up by HP to create a new product for the internet market, which was just emerging at that point in time. HP had been in business a long time, very successful, high commitment, high performance company, but most of their work was with businesses that required a development of an instrument for a particular purpose. This division was to be able to create a platform that many companies could use to basically measure frequencies, which are very important in the internet market. You got towers, you got all this stuff. Had to learn. They had to figure out what the frequency capability was in order to build a platform in an effective way. So what he said in part of in the honest conversation, this came later on when we started an honest conversation, which I'll get into. SRD suffers from a legacy of HP. We are not an instrument division, yet we managed to have structured SRD as though we are. In other words, they had taken on the structure and the processes of HP in a very different environment, and it was not working for them. He was very savvy to recognize that, and that came out in the conversation. Although he already knew it all the time. It was the conversation that brought some of this out. I won't go into that's not underlined here, because he begins to talk about in the ways in which it is they're not aligned. But he did say the systems market is very different than anything HP has done in the past with test and measurement. We need to start thinking of ourselves as a unique entity operating in circumstances that require a different strategy and structure than has been traditionally utilized in the past. So what had happened is management had simply adopted how they worked before, and it simply was not working. I use this to illustrate the importance of recognizing when your organization is adapting to a new set of circumstances, a new strategy. And a lot of companies kind of drift into a new strategy, and of course that's why the organization and they don't fully understand it. Okay. The thing that I want to illustrate here is that all of this information about that George Mosby was talking about and more was already known in the organization. And many of the problems are known in most of your organizations, but they're not fully understood by top management because of the factor of organizational silence, which is what our methodology is designed to overcome. And what effective organizations have to overcome, the inability of truth to speak to power. Think of it like a ship. You're going against huge icebergs and you don't know they're coming because people in the organization can't tell you what that is, what is really going wrong, what's not working. We've seen this over and over again. There have been many, many studies. We all know from our experience that we can't always go to the top and say, let me tell you the truth. And by the way, even if you as an individual did go to the top, right to the CEO, this is what's wrong, we got to fix this, you probably aren't going to have an effect because the CEO is going to wonder, are you a complainer? Do you really know what's going on? Do you really have the whole picture? So the methodology has to include more than one person. It's got to include the organization speaking. Of course, that's technically impossible in very large organizations, or unless you're all just 7 or 8 working around the table. Even then, the truth may not come out. Okay, let me give you an example. This is what one member of Hewlett-Packard Santa Rosa Systems Division, which is what we're focusing on now, said about what they could not do. I think people did not know how to break through it. You read about these bad marriages where the wife and the husband both know what's wrong. They just can't find a way to talk to each other about it. Often have to go to a counselor to really get that help if they even want to take that risk. And I think that what was going on here. We all knew the problems were there, and I think we could not find a way to discuss it with each other in a constructive way. This is fundamentally a real reason organizations get in trouble. Silence and the inability to talk about the problems. So how can we get organizations to begin to talk about their problems? That's really the challenge. So here is the basic lineup of the methodology, but I'm going to get much more into detail about it. Basically, what we had to figure out for Becton Dickinson, where all this started, in the 1988, and then we were consultants to Becton Dickinson to help them apply and learn this methodology for some 30 years, and was applied in all parts of the company at the corporate level. 4 CEOs used it to really take over the company eventually over time. And so the methodology starts with the leadership team. The leadership team has to has to develop a statement of direction. What is our purpose? What's our strategy? What are our values that we want to drive in? We want the organization to operate by. In HP had gotten to this very naturally because they had the CEO and the 2 founders had this way of thinking about. They worked well together, and they had a clear understanding of how they wanted to go about running the company. The senior team has to say, this is what our direction is, our strategic direction, purpose, and values. They have to appoint a task force of 8 people, 10 at the most, that are the high performers, high potential, high performers in the organization. Below them, 1 to 2 levels below them, that they each as a total senior team trust to come back with the truth. They're not people who are natural complainers. They're not people who, kind of stick out necessarily always, but they are people they will trust to go out and interview, that's the broader organization, 100 people in the organization. That's all. I don't care whether Becton Dickinson was a global technology company. And when applied to the corporation as a whole, that task force had to go to find 100 key people who are in various parts of the organization to learn the answer to 3 questions. what do you, and they had it usually in advance, told them, the manager, the people they were interviewing, this is what management is saying they're trying to do, strategy, etc. And what do you see? How do you think? What do you think of this direction? Does it seem right to you? Do you have critiques of it? What is it? 2, what do you see as the strengths of the organization that we can leverage to implement this strategy? And 3rd, what do you see? What do you see as the problems, the barriers, as we call them, to us implementing a strategy? Start talking. So this was an open-ended, not closed-ended conversation. Each task force member summarizes what they learned. They get together. I'll come back to this. And they create a set of themes. The themes are, these are the 5 or 6 major things that collectively seem to be bothering people or working in the organization. And they have to report that to senior management. Obviously, that itself is a problem we had to wrestle with, which I'll get into. Let's just keep going. These are the 7 things that over a period of many years have consistently come up. That is, they always come up in every organization, but overall, and we've done some content analysis across several business units to validate that these, in fact, are the truth. But we keep hearing them even today. Here are the 5 factors. Why am I not in presentation view? Okay. Oh, there we go. Okay. Here are the factors. Whoops. Come on. Whoa. Why is that?
If you want to, so Mike, if you want to see the slides, you just hit your escape and it'll take you out of that mode. So
okay. Yeah, I need, well, yeah. So 1 is that the senior team is ineffective. You heard that in the discussion of the Senator Systems Division. By the way, the ineffectiveness there was severe. The senior executive in charge, the general manager in charge of this business unit, was uncomfortable with conflict. They would have a senior meeting. There'd be arguments about what the direction is, what we should be doing, about problems, et cetera, et cetera. He finally said, we're not going to have any more meetings. And he's dealt with people one-on-one. That is a severe example of how effective senior teams get. They can't discuss problems. In this case, the meetings, often they don't discuss problems at all. They just review a lot of financial data. So that's that. In very many ways, the inability to speak, that's all part of what the book is going to be about. Parts about each of these. There is a clear, uncompelling strategy, values, and conflicting priorities. In an unclear strategy and direction is an overall problem in many, many organizations. Senior management maybe has a clear idea, often they may not, and may not agree on it, which is one of the reasons the rest of the organization does not think there's one compelling strategy. They always talk about different aspects of this. As one senior executive who went through this process said, I finally realized we had to write down and agree on exactly what was on a piece of paper before we could be sure we really had the same ideas. And even senior teams that have the same idea, think they have a senior, when they start discussing in the first step of this process what is our strategy, they come up with these things, conflicting priorities, unclear, etc. Leadership behavior in some way usually gets into it. The top task people report too top down, too laissez-faire, unengaged leaders. they're not engaged. They're not really trying to bring out and have open discussions to find out what they can do. Poor coordination across functions, businesses, or geographic regions, depending on how big you are and so forth, is always 100% of the time. This is a problem. This usually is the reason. The reason for this is the design of the organization itself. Has it been organized to really achieve the strategy? And of course, in the Santa Rosa System Division, no, it was not organized to achieve its business. It was organized to achieve the previous, the Hewlett-Packard's approach, traditional approach, not for dealing with a dynamic internet environment. So it was not designed properly. Failure to delegate decision rights and authority to the lowest possible level. I saw this at Corning 50 years ago when the first general manager came to me and said, "These are my problems." They hadn't delegated decisions to the lowest possible level. That was true of HP, Santa Rosa Systems Division. They were trying to get into 4 different businesses, and they all had to make this. They were trying to make decisions for those 4 businesses. They developed some strategy teams to discuss strategy, but they were not empowered to implement a business. They were empowered to talk. So they were talking teams. But it didn't, so the top had to make all the decisions. Inadequate leadership development capabilities and development in the organization came up as a huge problem in 8, 9, 10 out of 10 organizations. And when you really looked at it, well, we found that to be true when we went to the organization and said, if you want to use this methodology, you got to identify 8 of your best people. And they said, well, they're too busy. We don't have enough. Well, that right there, you saw the problem. But most people also saw the problem. So something was wrong with the way they were developing leaders, in my view, and often what the reason is that they see leadership development training as the answer, when we know that experience in different organizations, in different problems, stretch assignments, that's what develops leaders, not leadership training. And finally, poor vertical communication and lack of honest vertical communication. That is a problem. The top does not hear what the bottom is saying. The bottom is not getting enough information about what senior management is really trying to do. It may be a video slide presentation, but there's no way to discuss it, learn about it more, and become engaged in that problem sufficiently. These are the things are in the book. Each of these is going to be a chapter, because we learned a lot that we learned about what is behind these barriers, undiscussable barriers to effectiveness. Here is a view of what they are. You can see that that there's a bunch of difficult issues that are driving the organization into trouble. Let me just move this a little bit. Okay. You've got, SRSD already had an effective top team. I already talked about that. They virtually didn't even have meetings to really talk about strategy. It turned out that one member of the senior team running one department, called the Custom System Department, had begun to see the strategy differently, and that discussion never took place. Led to unclear. And unengaged, the top manager, the general manager of this division, was very conflict averse. He never really let the top team talk about problems, talk to the organization about problems, and was kind of both top down and laissez-faire at the same time. He was top down in opinion about what people should do, but he was very laissez-faire about dealing with those problems directly. The organization design was not the correct one, as I already mentioned. It was highly functional. It was not organized around the businesses they were trying to get in, which led them ultimately, I'll tell you where they ultimately went after an honest conversation, is creating a matrix organization with real business teams across the functions. Inadequate delegation was built into the way they were organized inappropriately. Everything went to the top rather than to a particular business strategy team, which wasn't able to do anything anyway. Poor leadership development. They didn't have the leaders. When we went to organize around a matrix, they couldn't find the people to run they had no people to run the business teams. So the top team had to decide that they were going to have to take double hat responsibility. And of course, the whole thing was, there was no honest conversation that came out of the process we had. They never could talk about all that effectively as an organization, as a whole. This is a collective. You have to think about change of a system as a collective process. Underlying all this is a systems perspective. So collectively, we as an organization have to hold hands, move into the future, talk to each other, and find out what we should be doing. Well, you can't do that with an organization because it's too large. There are too many people. We have developed a methodology to allow the representatives of the organization and to talk and learn what's going on, to talk with senior management and go back out into the organization and talk about what they found. So that is a view of the systemic aspects of ineffectiveness. Why is this not changing? Come on. There we go. Whoops. Okay. The ineffectiveness has a dynamic. This is what we call the dynamics of an ineffective organization. What you have is here's how the barriers work. The first three barriers: ineffective top team, unengaged management.
Hey, Mike, you have got the other slide. It's more red. I think that's the one you're referring to.
Yeah. I think you're right. Let me see if I turn off captions.
It's one before or after. If you hit your arrow forward or back on your keyboard, it should get you to the right one.
Hold on.
Yeah. Up or down arrow. Hit your up or down arrow on your keyboard.
Well, I'm hitting it. It's not.
Yeah. So click your mouse right now, just on the screen somewhere. Just click that. There you go.
Whoops.
Now hit the arrow. See down in the bottom left. You can see the arrows down the bottom left. Just click backwards one. See the very bottom left corner right there. Get a little bit further to your left. Down at the very bottom corner.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. Hit your left arrow key.
I should be able to move back.
Hit your left arrow key. Hit your left arrow key on your keyboard.
My left arrow key.
Yep.
Well, I'm doing that.
This doesn't like that. Okay. All right.
Hold on. I'll get this.
Okay.
I really apologize for this. Oh, wait a minute.
So, do you see the arrow in the very, very far left bottom corner of your screen there on the slides?
Oh, yes, I do. Now
click that button there.
Okay.
Now click it again.
Here we go. This
There's
is
where you want to be.
The dynamic of an ineffective organization.
Right on. Yep.
And what we've got here is the three barriers: ineffective team, overly directive or disengaged leader, and overload and conflicting priorities, which were constantly, we don't know what the priorities are, or we have different views of the priority. Those three interact to create a poor quality of strategic direction and values. That's where the problem starts. At the bottom, you see what the barriers are that relate to execution: poor coordination, inadequate delegation, and inability and capability of managers of basically they don't have enough good, effective managers because of ineffective developmental process. People are not moving from one function to another, from one division to another, from other countries to learn how to lead. And the final barrier, the poor vertical communication, is what it prevents, and no openness prevents lower levels from talking about the problems down here that are affecting execution, that the senior team needs to know so it can reorganize effectively or change its strategy or clarify its strategy. That's the dynamic of an ineffective organization. Whoops, let me go here. Okay. This occurs in every business unit. At the top unit is a CEO and the key people. At the bottom, there are various business units, functions, activities. It exists at every level, which leads me to another fundamental conclusion, that basically you have to have a change effort going on in every unit.
So go the other way. See the arrow on the other side. Move to the right.
I'm sorry?
Move to the right. Along to the right. Move your cursor. Keep going. Keep going. A little bit further.
Okay. Yeah.
Right there. There you go.
Okay. So you've got this going on in every unit. Conclusion. Fundamental corporate change does not occur until you have you engage subunits in changing themselves, including the top team. That is, there's an overall organization form. The top team there has to change the organization for the corporation at the top. But each unit needs to go through its own process of understanding the barriers, just as a top management team does. Let's move on.
Mike, go to the other arrow. Go the other way. Go the other way. To the other arrow on the right.
Yeah. I've got it. Thank you.
Thank you. Good? Okay, good. All right.
I've got it. Thank you. So this is the dynamic of an effective organization. These things have changed into positive elements. I can go through all of these and how SRSD changed them. Every one of these is exactly representative of what happened at HP as they finally grappled with the process. They changed the design of the organization into a matrix. I already mentioned this, from a functional to a virtual matrix, with business teams that ran the four businesses as opposed to the top running them. More delegation that way. They didn't have good leaders, so the senior team had to step in the double hat. But they had created a compelling direction and so on. So all these things changed as a result of an honest conversation. They really put it on the table, and they had a consultant that was myself and my colleague, and that was a critical part because we could help them interpret their data and be in the conversation with them so that we would offer alternatives to how to think the design of the organization and how to think about the change process. So this is a process that requires consultants. Whoops, no, I think I want to go forward. No, I'm sorry. I really apologize here.
You want to go to the other arrow? Go to the other arrow and keep clicking it. Go to the other arrow. Right. Keep going to the right. To your right. The other arrow. Right there. And click it a few times.
Okay, so here's what I believe an effective organization has to achieve. A system for organizing, managing, and leading aligned with the direction. I call that performance alignment. Number two, it needs psychological alignment. That is, stakeholders and leaders who are committed to the direction and the system of how they're going about doing things. That's got to be, you have to have that commitment. So there's an emotional side of this, and there's a head side of this, if you will. And thirdly, you need the capacity to learn and change on the go and realign as things continue to change. So you need a learning and governance system that enables honest, collective, and public conversations about the system, and the methodology we created is one of those. I may not be able to get to it because it's getting time. The strategic fitness process, let me just at least give you highlights. It has 9 steps that are an essential part of the process. The top team starts by defining a direction. They appoint a task force that goes out and interviews 100 people. Each person takes some of those 100. So you got 8 people. It's a double hat responsibility. You spend, doing 10 interviews. The task force interviews people. I should probably move through this the way it's supposed to be moved through. So it starts up there. It goes down to the task force interviews. The task force reports the unvarnished truth to senior teams. That itself is a power. Let me tell you how we do that. Diagnose the root causes of ineffectiveness to achieve the direction. That's done by the senior team in conversation by itself. After the task force reports, the task force leaves. They're not part of that conversation. They develop an agenda, the top team does. It meets to get a critique from the task force about whether the direction they've created will work, and to basically disagree when they have not done a good enough job from their point of view of understanding the problems, and they have to work together to revise the agenda. That is exactly what happened at the HP Santa Rosa Systems Division, because in fact the senior team did not design quite, there was a distrust of how they'd come to that. And then finally, when they agree, that is communicated to the whole organization by the senior team or its members, and sometimes the task force itself. In a large meeting of the top 100 or 200, talks about what they learned and what they understood senior management had come to understand. So the whole truth is out to the whole organization. This is a quick view of how we get honest conversation on the table. The task force is in the middle of the room. They have developed themes, and they begin to talk about each theme collectively, which each member of the task force or leading the conversation. But it's a conversation. We learned that PowerPoints don't work. They put too much pressure on the individual giving the PowerPoint presentation, and it does not allow a rich discussion of what really is going on. So the unvarnished truth is heard in a productive way. The senior team itself is given ground rules. The ground rules are: you can't interrupt. Truth is the truth. What perception is fact. That's what people in the organization see. And you can't ask people where they got the information, because this is a collective conversation, and this has got to be anonymous to the people who give it. Here is what one executive said. I think it was, again, George Mosby. The task force feedback really served several important roles. Not only did it function as a powerful tool to communicate difficult issues, but it also showed that the top team cared about the employees through what employees thought, and that we could not institute a change process without asking for their input. That's powerful. The fact that you're simply asking them to tell you the truth is a big deal. It creates trust. There's a lot of psychological research on that. Trust starts with vulnerability. The senior executive and the SOP team have made themselves vulnerable. Also, I believe that by asking their unvarnished opinions, the employees realized just how serious we were about change. Scott Wright, the general manager, probably was took the most amount of risk initiating a process like this, meaning he had to be able to be secure enough to do it. Well, he took our word about trying it. When it was done, he said, we're going to do this every year. He really began to understand and learn from this process that he had to make himself vulnerable, ask for help on a continuous basis as the strategy was updated and continuing to change. He acted as a linchpin to the whole process. Let me keep going here quickly. So again, this is what an effective organization looks like. Here are some of the results. You can see sales were dramatically up, profits up even more. Of course, they started at a very low level and the business was growing, but they really leveraged the business, and they always said this couldn't have been done without the changes they made. Here is what Ned Barnhold, the EVP of the test and measurement sector, of which they were a part, said. It is the work they did, and of course that incorporated what he meant was Santa Rosa System Division on alignment. Again, he knew some process was being used, but that's what really did it here. That got them to come to grips with what the business they wanted to go after and what the business model was that they needed. Today, I see them as one of our star divisions compared to other divisions. It's probably the most dramatic turnaround. It was a dramatic turnaround because the truth had been on the table and they could really deal with it. Here's what Jody Edwards, the HR manager, who was the original one to tell me about the problems. We lost a lot of employee satisfaction and commitment as a result of our problems, but we gained it and more through the process, the strategic fitness process, and the changes it enabled. People from other divisions now want to come to work here because they cite this interesting process. That's the honest conversation that we conduct annually as one of the reasons they want to come. So the process itself, that kind of openness, is attractive to people. And well, I probably don't have enough time to go through all of these reasons, but basically it provides information and creates a partnership with employees. Valuable information, a partnership. It changes the system because it addresses hard issues and emotional heart issues. People are able to talk honestly about politics and other things that are going. Egos and politics are suppressed. Trust and commitment increases dramatically. And transparency, learning, and accountability for change increasing by the top team. As soon as they start this process, they know they've got to do something. Now, not all organizations and not all leaders, leaders are developed, but not all leaders want to go ahead with this. And that's one of the issues. I think we can have a larger conversation about who we select to be leaders in an organization. I think we go after people who are sure they're sure of what they want to do and they do it, and it leaves out the whole process of what we're talking about. Hope for change will really happen is rekindled as a result of this. So many people in organizations do not think their business can change. Okay, I think we should probably. I should just say that this is a normative process. Means we've created a process that will work when the conditions are right. these are the conditions. Obviously, the leader is a key. They have to be willing to listen and go into this process secure enough to be able to listen to the truth. There has to be a performance orientation and pressure for getting better in order to adopt such a process. The corporate context has to be right. I'm sorry, that was a misprint there. Corporate context, if you go into an organization that's highly political, it's unlikely that the lower levels are going to be willing to get involved. Visible and sustained execution of the action plan by the leader once the truth is going is absolutely required to sustain the momentum of this and can keep doing it from year to year as the Santa Rosa System Division did. And you got to have consultants, and there has to be a consulting capability to help with design questions, to help guide them in this direction, and capability and availability. Being there matters. Doesn't have to be every day, but from time to time. The Santa Rosa System Division kept calling us when they had this meeting. They didn't want any other help, but just come and be in the meeting when the truth speaks to power and help us think about how to deal with it a little bit. So that is what I want to talk about. Let me just quickly go forward.
Well, Mike, if you're not rushed, we got a little time, and I'm going to adjust things a little bit because I want to make sure you have a good closing on this. We're going to do a little bit of small group discussion, some Q&A, and then we'll wrap up with the questions. But we're just going to go a little bit longer for those that can't stay. Just you'll be able to see the recording, and that'll be just fine. So, but Mike, I really love what you're sharing. I think this is your model is elegant.
We were going to have small groups, but let's just go to a Q&A.
We'll do small groups. We got time. If you're okay taking a few extra minutes, no problem.
Okay. All right.
Okay? I don't want you rushing. I want you to go ahead and give this a proper wrap up. Okay. So keep going and just give us a proper wrap up on this.
So here are the questions I want you to think about. Do the silence exist in your organization or organizations you are serving as a consultant? How do they undermine effectiveness? And are your leaders ready to have an honest conversation? And the answer to that a lot of times is not necessarily yes. So Lisa, can you create small groups?
Yep. Thank you, Lisa. And Lisa's our producer director today, and she's runs these. And so thank you, Lisa, so much for running things smoothly and taking good care of Mike. So take a few minutes, head on out, and we'll bring you back in just a few minutes to have a conversation around these questions and bring back some questions, okay?
Good.
You know, and people are heading out. That's really great. Mike, I just want to tell you, I love you, man. I love your work. I love how your brain thinks. I think that what you are putting together is what I like to use as a word when I look at models or frameworks is it's elegant. There's a symmetry to it. There is a consistency. There's like that mathematical formula of beauty. There's a beauty to kind of what you've put together and what you're sharing. And I really like it. I think what I particularly like is, you know, you set up the context for what's the problem, and the model lends itself to two sides of the coin, right? The effective and ineffective. Then you flow it into the kind of the three levels, which really gets at the role of that task force, the role of that, and it's a lot of different models talk about that, but don't give it as much front of the room attention. That really is the lever point that really can make all the difference in the world. And so you bring that forward, you show that, then you show how to sequence your way through those layers, those three levels, in a very set of practical steps. And then you talked about how to facilitate that conversation and help to accelerate the top leaders' understanding of that, because they don't have the time to do all of that listening work that task force is doing. It's absolutely beautiful.
Well, I appreciate your reference to make to this as a positive thing, and I think it has worked. You heard what some people, what the senior members saw was happening in this division. And that happens, but you've got to have the right condition, your right leader in the right conditions to allow this process to go forward. It's a normative process. It's built around, we try to build the elegance that you talked about.
Yeah. So here's a question I have for you, and we can, if it's worthwhile to repeat, we can, because we keep recording right now while they're in their small groups so that we have some good content here as we're pausing. But here's the thing: getting the top leaders to recognize how important it is for them to adopt this type of model and to support it, right? So that the leaders need to adopt this and be willing to be vulnerable. They've got to be willing to be vulnerable. Absolutely. And see the power in that vulnerability to adopt something like this. They need to see that strength comes through vulnerability. And if they don't see that, it's hard. But now there's two ways to do it. One, you can, two ways. I'm just curious how you have dealt with these two ways, directions to get them to be willing. One is they look at what you're saying, they read your book, they talk to you. Let's go. We're on board, right? So, and then there's the other way, which is somehow it bubbles up in a way that they adopt the process, because they got to adopt this process before they can get to doing the work.
That's right.
Right. So somebody's got to get them to buy into it and be willing to stay the course. Can you talk a little bit about the different, maybe the two, what's the most effective way? And are there a couple of different ways to get them to say, okay, we will take this process?
Number one, they have to have a problem that starts with them coming to their consultants, to their organization consultants, to help them with the problem. Otherwise, and it takes top management to begin to create the climate for this by saying either adopting it themselves or creating a model of how it can work in one business so that other business unit leaders can learn that this is really a productive process that can work. That's what happened at a number of organizations. It certainly happened at Becton Dickinson. The top management allowed and encouraged a few units to begin to model the process, and then had them talk in corporate meetings and so forth about what happened as a result of the process, so that others would be encouraged to move forward. And I also got management to begin to think, although initially that to really part of the process is a sorting process. Which leaders are willing to and capable of implementing the process and doing it well and reporting to them what they learned openly. And as soon as that was not possible, I told them they should really move the leader to another role. They are not good leaders. This is a process for also discovering who your leaders are. That is humble enough to ask for help. That matters.
Yeah. And I think getting at a really simple piece, how do you convince the leader and leadership team? What is the technique for so they got to have a problem, but what's the most effective techniques you've used to get them to, okay, I understand and I'm willing to adopt this process? What is the most important technique you've used? Are there a couple different ways to get it done?
The most profound way is for me to say to them, here's what the process is. Here are the basic steps in a process. Go talk to another unit leader, another manager who has used the process. Call them, or if they're in your own organization, you probably know them. Go and talk to them about the process and what it did for them and how it works. That is the most profound way that I've found managers get convinced.
They got to hear from a peer, somebody that they trust that's tried it. So the key is to have some success somewhere else.
Have a success somewhere else. Or go. So with CEOs, I asked him to talk to Ed Ludwig, who was the CEO of Becton Dickinson, and used it at his business unit and at the corporate level, and just talk to him, find out what it's about. Now, that sometimes that works and not always. It doesn't always work.
Gotcha. So I think everybody's back, and so what we're going to do is take the slides off, and we're going to bring all of us into one big screen of pictures. So Lisa will do that for you. You don't have to do anything. And Lisa, if you can bring everybody in and all on the same screen so we can
Okay.
all see each other, and we'll go from there. So Lisa's going to get that done. Lisa, are you there? Okay. So yeah, great, great. And so we'll take a few minutes to debrief, but I want to kind of go to Don Warwick, who said something that I think for you to hear, Mike. And then I'll just open up for a little bit of Q&A, and then David and I will take the next phase of our
Okay.
conversation with you. But Don, you wanted to share something that I saw that you put in the chat.
Well, what I was saying was that for Mike, I think this book he's doing now may be the most important of all the ones he's written, and that it's truly inspiring to see him at this stage of his career still advancing the field of OD. But this whole idea of true conversations is so critical. And his colleague Amy Edmondson's written some about that with psychological safety. But it's really so important in organizations because there are all kinds of barriers, like Mike mentioned, to being truthful. And if you know the truth, you can almost always do something about it. But if that truth is shaded, guarded, you're going to keep making the same mistakes and not understand why.
Yeah, what we try to do is to deal with the psychological safety problem by creating the structure of the task force, the senior team, and the organization, and created a structure for honest conversation. That helps people feel safer about it.
Yeah, that's really great. So I'm not going to put you on the spot, Gail, but you've been here for the last 2 or 3 in a row, and so I'm really glad that you've been here. And the same, Lakia or Carter. I'm gonna call on you two in just a second. I want to give you just a heads up so that you don't get shocked. I'm going to give you a chance to ask a question and to give Mike your reactions, because as he writes the book, I think honest reactions will help him as he thinks about the book. Again, he wants that kind of listening that he's also advocating here, right? But I think the person I can put on the spot the easiest is going to be 2 people. It's going to be Dave and Carol. And so, Dave, if you go first, Carol second, and then I'll go to Gail third and Carter fourth, and then the rest of you, Gigi, is it Gigi?
It's Gigi. Gigi.
Yeah, I'm going to get to see you pretty soon in the master's program. We have Jillian and Teo, and Dave and I are going to get to talk to you. So I want you all to kind of follow up and behind if you have other questions. But I wanted to kind of cue up a little bit of order here. So, Dave.
All right, Dave, let's hear the truth.
Well, who does the varnishing of that we have to unvarnish? And I'm not being cynical. I'm thinking there's a lot of varnishing that has to go on in order for you to have to deal with that much impaction. Is it typically the top senior leaders who just say, put down the shield and paint the varnish on everything?
I'm sorry, the question is,
who does when we're looking at unvarnished truth, the truth was varnished. Who put the varnish on there?
The unvarnished, we call that the unvarnished truth. It comes from the task force, from what they learn.
Right.
Because what they learn put into themes really gets to the discussion that begins to clarify what's really going on, if you will, take the varnish off these problems or raise new problems that the senior management hasn't even thought about or doesn't know much about.
Yeah. It may be just a natural phenomenon that the truth gets covered and covered and covered and covered at every level in every unit until no one knows what it is anymore. Yeah.
Yeah, and of course, if you use it over and over again, more the whole thing gets peeled more and more.
Yeah.
And you get to and the SRSD did this 5 years in a row, and they will tell you more things came up over time, and we got a better understanding of what the real problem was. So it's a growing understanding. It isn't the conversation ideally should keep going on, and the most successful ones were that they did that. They had ongoing conversations.
That's wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah. Carol, your thoughts?
My first thought is, where was this 40 years ago?
Yeah.
Because it hasn't changed.
Where was this 40 years ago, Mike?
Well, it took me 40 years to figure it out.
Because the circumstances were just the same. But my practical applied question is, I'm very interested in the effective organization piece, where you really go back to socio-technical systems with performance and psychological pieces. But the one that is very relevant to me and most of the people on this call is the capacity to learn and change. And when you said leadership training is not the answer, and we still have so many organizations investing so much in leadership training, and take it to the situation that most of the people on the call are in. We're interested in doctoral education, and we're interested in scholar practitioners who need to understand what you're talking about. How do we do that? I don't expect you to answer it, but that's my reflection and my personal challenge.
Well, I think, again, it gets to the challenge. I think the process itself is educational. So that is in it. Once you're in it, you begin to see the organization, but you also begin to see what it takes to have the conversation, that, the capacity to learn and change. As Ed Ludwig, the former CEO of Becton Dickinson, would tell you in a minute. So I think the answer to learning is really to be able to do what Lewin talked about, which is begin this process of change and understand your own organization and the process for learning in action. I don't think any of the top-down education we do and many good programs, what appear to be good programs, really have an effect. We wrote a book called The Critical Path to Corporate Renewal in 1990, which did a study of this and came out with what we call, chapter 2 was The Fallacy of Programmatic Change.
Yeah.
And there was an HBR article about that. That's what we have to get to. And the problem is, by the way, HR tends to collude with senior management by seeing more resources coming when they're told to create a program, when in fact it's the wrong thing to do. And they have to confront management, and HR often does not do that, by the way, in action, in reality. We as scholar consultants who know more about this can do that if we're in the system. And are doing it. So and I think the only way we're going to overcome these negative or these wrong approaches is by demonstrating positive examples and having diffusion of those examples around the world, from company to company, from business unit to business unit within an organization. We need to model it and have people talk to each other about what works and doesn't work.
That's great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Gail, you want to jump in?
I'm sorry?
I put a pass in the chat,
Okay,
Dr.
no
Katie.
worries.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. I'm glad you're here. Carter, how about you?
Hi, good morning. And thank you again, Professor Beer, for all of your insight on this. I'm Carter. I am a doctoral student in the DODC program. And so as I'm listening to you speak, I'm filtering it through two lenses. One is the lens of employer branding and how this sits within the framework of building an effective employer brand. And then because I've spent almost a decade in K-12, I also filter it through the lens of how this could work in the K-12 system. And so one of the questions that I have is, have you considered, or how do you, about apathy? How do we overcome apathy and the role it plays in having these honest conversations?
Apathy.
I think I can't overcome apathy except to have people be performance oriented. They have to have an aspiration to do something. They have to, and that again goes back to one of the conditions I mentioned, which is basically you're in some organization where results are required. There are end results required, and you are not achieving the end results, and that begins to get you out of apathy. And management has a performance orientation, so they're holding people accountable for performance. It all starts with that accountability that then gets you to ask more, how can I get better? I'm not achieving what they expect me to achieve. And that then leads to more questions about how do I get there? And that question is critical to opening up the idea that there are some ways to do it, and that are a little more difficult because they involve you confronting the truth. And again, it's performance orientation is where you got to start with that.
Yeah. Look, Carter, what I would say, and Mike, as I look at your model again, it's just such an elegant and well-crafted framework. So think about it, Carter, like a logic model, in which on the far right side you got this performance, and then when you come back one layer in the logic model, so think of it as 3 steps. When you come back one step, you then have those that circle he has, the ineffective and effective organization, and the 7 characteristics. Those 7 characteristics have to be dealt in order to get to that first layer, right? So
Yeah.
now how do you do that? Well, then you come back one step before at the very beginning, and that's his 3 layers and the little pathway of steps you need to take. If you do that, take those steps, it starts to shift those 7 elements. Those 7 elements shift, and you start getting those performance-based results.
Yeah.
And I think you'll find a lot of articles. There's a nice one in Harvard Business Review from long ago. It's called the Employee Customer Profit Chain at Sears.
Yes.
And it's a really good one. And by the way, Mike, Tony Rucci came in and co-taught one of the very first class with me for our doctoral program back in 7 years ago. He came in and did that with me. It was really a great pleasure to have him. And so I think, Carter, what you got to do is you got this like really compelling case, like things aren't working on the far right. Then you come all the way back over to the beginning and say, well, here's a process you can use to get there. And the in-between point are these 7 effective organizational characteristics that you're trying to build. And that you got to get those going, but you do it with this process to get to that far right. And so that logic model approach, I think, is probably a way not to deal with apathy, but to get leaders willing to do what's necessary to create the conditions for people to begin to confront the apathy.
Well, there are 2 levels of apathy. The performance orientation, but the other is leaders often are also apathetic or don't want to create change because it's threatening. When they hear from their own employees about what the problems are, they are forced to go ahead and think about this. They know that if they don't respond to the employees, to the task force, and therefore to the employees, they're gone. They've lost all their capability to lead, and they kind of know that. But they got to get into the process to begin with, and that's where the reality. That's why Ed Ludwig says this was the most effective. This was the thing that made me effective enough to become the CEO of the company when I did it in a business unit. So I think that's it. Obviously, that it's a multiple level problem that you got to solve.
So before we shift on, Jillian hasn't had a chance, or Teo, or Gigi, if any of you want to say any final comments before we move on. Lisa, our director, you may have some thoughts too. But I just want to open up for you all if you have any other comments you want to make or questions, and then we'll move into the next set of questions.
Just think, yes, speaking truth to power, but also then power listening to truth. the flip side of it too. And I think those things are both so important. And this has been helpful in seeing how you can make that, kind of actually happen. So thank you.
Yeah. Mike, I would say one thing. I would love to hear your thoughts on this. When you frame truth speaking to power, sometimes it's thought of as a confrontation, like truth speaking to power. Like there's something wrong with power, and truth has to speak to it. Like some people say that sometimes. Could you give your sense of what it means when truth speaks to power from a really generative, co-created kind of experience? Rather than someone having to be truth speaking to power, it's, how would you frame it up?
You're talking to me, I take it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, I think it's you're right. Maybe truth speaking to power is the wrong way to frame. It's just one way to talk about it. I think really it's about searching for the truth, searching for what we need to co-create. It is a co-creation process. There's no question about it. It says the leader, the task force, and the organization have to move collaboratively towards a change process, or the organization has to collectively hold hands to figure out what to do to get better. So I think maybe framing it as how do we get better? We get better by talking about what the issues are. That's basically what I think I'm advocating here.
I think there's an important piece around encouraging people to be brave enough to speak to power, and that it's an okay thing to enable that from a positive, generative way, and to acknowledge the importance of that. So I think I wouldn't get rid of that personally. I think it's important to acknowledge that there's two ways to approach speaking truth speaking to power.
Yeah. This is a collaborative process. This is not a blaming process. This is not a yelling process. This is a conversation. So I want to go back to conversation.
Rooted in vulnerability.
What's that? Yes.
Right? That's what enables it to become a generative experience.
Yes, completely right.
Yeah.
Vulnerability by the leaders to enable the conversation.
Yeah, through vulnerability and trust.
Yeah, well, that creates trust, right?
Right.
It builds trust. What we saw is trust increases as a result of this. And that's what makes it ultimately attractive to leaders and to the organization. As Jody Edwards said, more people want to come into the organization now as opposed to leaving because they heard about this process. That's how she took why people were coming back. They like hearing about this process.
Right on. That's beautiful.
It empowered them. We talk about empowering. This is an empowering process.
It's beautiful. I love it. I love it. I love it, love it, love it. So anybody else have anything they want to say before we make a transition? And David, I want to give you a chance to speak about this topic, and then we'll allow a second for us to make a transition into our questions. But anybody have anything they want to say? And then David, if you want to say something about this, and then we'll move into our final round of questions.
I have a comment for Michael. I think, Michael, by the way, your slides are just amazing. But I think your biggest challenge, as you probably tell leaders, is to simplify this to the point that it's very apparent and obvious, the major theme of it. And so you get all those slides down to one major one that people can quickly understand. And some of the language I think that you use will probably do that. But I don't know if you're following that, but you've worked with enough leaders to know that the best take a complex situation and reduce it down to something really simple that everybody understands, and then things move forward fast. So I think that's going to be your biggest challenge. You can have all the backup for those that want to really dig, but the ultimate goal is going to be to communicate this message that you have that's so important in such a simple way that everybody grasps it.
Allow me to throw in an idea. Acupuncture is what we use to unblock the flow of chi or energy that keeps all of our cells alive. Truth is the chi of organizations. And wherever truth cannot flow, it's blocked and it needs to be confronted the way you've designed. But I think truth is so important that that's going to be the top headline.
That's
And
really beautiful. Well done. That's a really great
Well,
analogy. I
truth and
like that.
trust, right? As you mentioned.
well, exactly. It's a truth and trust are yin and yang, but wherever it's blocked, that organization starts to die. Similar to when I go to acupuncture, it's to free up something that hurts. So I think the acupuncturist of organizational effectiveness.
Dave, if I would say one thing in closing for myself, I'm really challenging all of you to begin to adopt a way of thinking about this and a process for doing it and begin to try to use it.
Yeah,
Because I can't just, I'm not going to do it myself. I just turned 90, okay? I need others to begin to adopt a way of thinking and a methodology that allows you to do it reasonably safely and correctly, if you will. It's a little bit of a painting by the numbers, right? It's hard to do, so you got to paint by the numbers, at least to start with. Once the organization gets freed up, people, they begin to say, we don't need a task force. We can just, we don't need the structure of this. We need a task force, and we don't need it. We can do this ourselves, which is it happened in a lot of in some organizations that repeated this over time, as SRSD did.
great.
All right, David. So, David Bright,
I'm here.
do you have anything you want to say before we transition?
I don't, other than just to thank you. And Michael, I can't believe you're 90 years old.
I can't either, Dave.
90 down, 90 to go. I know I'm very grateful for the wisdom that's embedded in this work. And I think for me, the questions I have really relate to different ways to achieve the same environment of trust. Like this is a model that definitely works. I'm curious. I'm thinking about other ways for leaders to get to that same level of capacity to be transparent, to hear, So this particular model seems to be especially appropriate in environments where there is a veneer where there is censorship, there is maybe a lack of trust and so forth. But what could it look like if an organization and a leader, just in the way that the leader works day in and day out, creates an environment where this is happening all the time? And that would be maybe an ideal aspiration, but that's where my mind is going.
When you find other ways that work, let me know. Seriously, I agree with you. In fact, I didn't get to a slide. There are principles here.
Right.
Underneath this, that I could have shared that if you can apply the principles in other ways, great.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. That's where my curiosity is going.
Yeah, well, mine too.
Yeah. So anyway, I know we're limited on time. So Steve, let's
So we'll make a transition. So one of the things I'll just say is I got if you can shut that for me. One of the things is I got an article accepted in Jabs a little bit earlier this morning. It's on the liminal nature of change and the power of the pause, the power of the space in between. And one of the things I say in there is like when you're in a moment on an agenda and you're moving between two topics, we're moving into a new topic, pause, take a breath, and allow for transition to the next topic. And so it's really kind of interesting to see it coming to life here because I just made me real present with the fact that we just take a breath. This is now we're going to move into another conversation with you. It's about the field of OD, and so I want everybody to just sort of take a breath and kind of get settled into a series of questions because we want to hear from you and this is about the field. So what we're doing, what David and I are doing, is we are with a group of others. We're using this series and last year's series and other methods to build more of an intentional foundation for our field and start to work towards the professionalization of the field and some other things that we would like to try to support as we help the field to stay relevant in the future. And to do that, we wanted to talk with you and others to ask you a few questions about the foundations of the field. Some of this is just basic for you, but it's still important because we're going to thematically analyze all of this and use this to report out on some of the themes. And so we got a few questions that we want to ask you. And the first one is really getting at defining and describing the field. And for you, I'd like to know how you define the field of ODC today and maybe how it's changed from your perspective over the years to get to your perspective, how you describe the field of ODC, organization development and change. So that's for you, Mike.
What's the foundation of the field, I think?
And how do you describe the field and how has it evolved over the years? How do you describe the field of ODC and how has it evolved over the years?
Well, I define the field as making organizations better and able to achieve their aspirations. And I believe the field is evolved to a better understanding of that as opposed to a training and educational perspective. It goes back to earlier points we discussed. I do not think, by the way, that the field is evolving to thinking about how to create the methodologies to enable people to and managers and organizations to do this, because it is. I also define the field as being able to unblock. I guess Dave talked about this earlier. How do we unblock the capability of the field to really engage itself as a system, as a community, looking at itself and how it wants to work? That's, I think, the aspiration that we should have.
And and you as an IO psychologist, what sets ODC apart or makes it unique when you think of it in comparison to IO psychology, HR, or other fields?
I think the systems perspective, thinking about an organization, IO psychology is individually oriented. It's too individually oriented. It's about selection. It's about developing and promoting questions that are focused on individuals. How do we? Organizations are not looking at organizational subunits and saying which are the better units that we have. How do we think about hold on. How do we think about our organizational unit? How do we think about collectivity? The most profound thing I ever did was get top management at Becton Dickinson to talk about 12 organizational businesses. Now, don't talk to me about their results. Talk to me about how you think they're functioning as an organization. And they began to make some differentiations. So thinking about organizational subunits in your overall system is a much better way to think about organizational development as opposed to thinking about individual development. That, to me, is a very important distinction between the...
Yeah, I get you, Mike. David's going to ask you the next question. He has a question for you. David Bright.
So we think about the field and the
David, you could speak closer to it. The microphone is his system's not as loud on his end, so you need to speak into your mic a little bit louder.
Okay, so I'll speak really loud. As we think about the field and the foundational thought leaders of the field, who are the key historical leaders and thinkers whose work anchors the field of ODC?
And that's for you, Mike.
Well, obviously, I think Lewin created that foundation. I'm trying to think now. You got me. You got me. I got to think about who are the other individuals. I'm blocking for the moment. I'm sorry.
Yeah, we can come back to it.
Yep.
It'll as it churns up, come back to it.
Say again.
We'll come back to that. We'll come back
Okay.
to it. So as it comes back to you, yeah.
Yeah. And I guess similar to that, Michael, what are who would be some current voices who are shaping the field of ODC right now, and what makes their contributions especially stand out for you?
Well, I would have said, and I might still say if I knew more, that Becton Dickinson actually was such an organization. And I would have said some of the organization units at Agilent, which we worked with, were good examples. I'm using so that I don't have an unlimited view of all organizations, so I can't tell you that. I can only talk to you about the organizations we have dealt with, and of course, I've been a little bit less involved in direct consulting over the last maybe 5 or 6 years. But those are companies that I would have said back in the 30 years, in the 35 to 40 years since 1988 when this started, Becton Dickinson grew enormously in its organizational capability because it had leaders that began to approach and begin to use the methodology itself or that way of thinking. So Gilmartin was succeeded by a CEO who agreed that the organization was too bureaucratic, that it had to open up and begin to allow and empower business units. Succeeded by Ed Ludwig, succeeded by his successor, and we found a way for that to happen actually, because his successor and Ed ran an SFP process like I'm talking about, strategic fitness process, collectively together. His successor began to apply it himself and use it to grow the company and make it more effective. And this is a company, by the way, in the first SFP we did at the corporate level with Gilmartin, they came back and said, we are not a human organization. That was a powerful set of feedback for Gilmartin, who said, oh my God, we're not. He never thought of it that way. Because they were so strategy oriented, they never thought about any of the human elements of this. And that organization was no longer true 20 to 30 years later. So I thought they made enormous progress, and it's an organization that was progressing. I don't know where they are today.
Gotcha. So I'm going to ask, I have Mike, I have another question for you, and then David, you get the competency one next. So, Michael, what I would love to know, and you have your model that you shared today. You have your model today that you shared. What are some of the other models that are out there that are your favorite go-to models that you like to encourage people to go learn more about?
Well, appreciative inquiry would be one of them. I don't know enough about appreciative inquiry as a methodology. It really starts in a different way than we do, okay? We do start with talking about the problems as opposed to with appreciation as the positive elements of this. So that has always been a thought in my mind. I'd like to understand how these two methodologies and approaches, what we've really created is how do they differ in power and effectiveness. Each one has certain things that are good about it. I mean, I've heard a lot of positive things about appreciative inquiry. I don't really know, and I know roughly what it is, but I don't really understand it. And I'd like to know how these two approaches might link together. One of the things we did is we made sure when we got to understand a little bit about appreciative inquiry, we asked the question, what are your strengths in the organization? We can't get management to say enough about strengths. They love to talk about their problems, but how do we get them to talk about their strengths and leveraging them? But again, the two different approaches to me are different, and I'd love to understand what the implications of that difference are.
That's very interesting perspective. Are there any other models or theories that are on your favorite list?
Well, I can't tell you what that would be right now. I just
and you can let us know later, because we'll get to questions. You can let us know later. Yeah, but these are really top of mind questions, and then we'll send you the questions, and you can reflect on them later as well. So David, you want to ask the next question?
Sure, and I'm also putting it into the chat so you can read it if that would be helpful. So you think about the competencies that are really important for us to encapsulate and understand and develop as a field. What are the essential competencies for practitioners of the field in the field of organization development and change, and what are the competencies for scholars who pursue the knowledge that's required for or supports the field of organization development and change?
Well, first, I'll start at the back end of this. I think the most important thing for scholars to understand is that getting into action with an organization or with many organizations and yielding what they learn from that is the scholarship that we should be. That's how everything I've created has come from the inaction with organizations in a consulting relationship. But I've taken the time to reflect on successes and cross case comparisons to build over time an understanding of how I see organizations working or not working. So I would say use your consulting to create some scholarship, if you will. And we don't, consultants go out and do one after another. They don't reflect enough on what the hell they're learning from a particular engagement or comparing their engagements.
That's
okay?
great.
That to me is the core of the field.
That's great. I appreciate that perspective so much. Is there anything else that you would offer as far as competencies for practitioners or competencies for scholars?
Well, the competencies for practitioners is to be comfortable, to learn to be comfortable challenging organizations more. One of the things that I pride myself in being is I do challenge leaders. I'm not afraid to challenge them about some aspects of their own style or their organization to be able to get them to begin to understand. And I'm not afraid of losing the engagement. So I think one of the things that consultants should do is be okay with losing a client. Now, if you're living in a large consultancy, that may be more difficult than if you're an individual consultant or a much smaller consulting firm. Even with my own TruePoint, my own co-creation, sometimes I think they're afraid to really challenge the leader to begin to appreciate this approach to organization change. I think it's a front-end conversation. Look, if you want to change, are you willing to hear the truth? Are you willing to make yourself vulnerable? Because these are the ways we have learned you are likely to make more progress as a leader and as an organization. Well, do we do enough of that with leaders? Are we willing to challenge them in a constructive way? I don't mean in a blaming way, but really, this is kind of what we've learned, and so I think that's one of the biggest things I would would say consultants can do to be more successful?
Excellent.
Thank you.
Okay. And so when you think of Mike, when you think of your favorite books or classic articles, do you have any favorite books or articles that you like to keep on your shelf or invite people just to top of mind? This is not the exhaustive list, but the top of mind are books or articles that are important to you.
Huh. Oh boy. Which of the well, one of the most important books I read early in my career, which helped me through a couple of it, was Paul Lawrence and Jay Lorsch's book, Organization and Environment, because it at a theoretical level, well, and in fact, turned out that Paul was a very practical level himself. They kind of bring out the importance of alignment as a critical factor. It doesn't matter what the specifics are, the organization has to respond to its environment. To think about that about organizations is also fundamentally important. So the first question a consultant should ask is, what changed? What is your environment? What are the demands of your customers, of the demands of being successful in your environment? And let's take a look at whether you organize on it. By the way, that's another way to approach, gentlemen, back to the earlier question that David asked. How do you approach CEOs? That's a good question. What has changed in your environment, and are you able to achieve what you want to achieve? That was basically Gil Martin's wonderful question, which gave me a life for 30 years, is help us become an organization capable of implementing our strategy. So the question to the CEO is, are you implementing, is your strategy being implemented effectively? Are you moving fast enough to where you're trying to go? Those are good questions that one can ask.
What do you see as the best periodicals, journals, and associations?
The Journal of Applied Behavioral Science is the one that I look to, but I have to be honest that a lot of the journals get very dry and don't really get to. They're too narrow, and the articles are too narrow in scope. So I'm trying to find I don't know. I'm not sure I know what journal is allowing more a discussion of single cases and the learnings that one gets from that.
Very rare.
Yeah. Great. And what's your favorite?
I think it takes an unraveling process. I'm sorry, yes?
What are your favorite organizations or associations for people to affiliate with? Organizations or associations to affiliate with?
I think the division of organization change and development in the academy would be one. I used to be involved with the organization or OD network, but I'm not now, so I'm not sure where that is. But I found the idea of practitioners talking to practitioners in a way that it unravels what they're learning was a way of at one time for me to learn. I am not involved in the organization in the OD network anymore. So I would say those are the two organizations that I will look to for different kind of learning, but learning. But I thought the division of the Academy division of organization development and change is really the best place that I really have associations from which I can learn and so forth.
Gotcha.
That's great.
Yeah, thank you. So we got a final wrap up. David Bright's got it. The final wrap up.
Okay. So, and again, I just put it in the chat. Succinctly, what is the mission of the field of ODC, and what does this field contribute to the world when at its best?
What is the mission, I think, is to help organizations learn how to be better, learn how to be better, not just to be better. I think the mission is to help help organizations figure out in some way, whether using whatever methodology they want to have, how to learn from their own organization what's working and not working, and make that a conversation. To recognize that it's all about conversation. If you don't have a conversation, you cannot move forward. It's a conversation between different people with different sets, different eyes on what's happening in the organization or outside the organization with the customer, is where you get some benefit. So it's conversation. How do we get honest conversation? I think that's the core idea.
Gotcha.
Very good. Thank you.
Well, Michael, thanks. This has been a wonderful session with you. Thank you. I'm glad we recorded all of it, because a lot of people are going to want to listen to this again, and we're going to definitely want that. So, my takeaway, and if anybody in the chat wants to put, what's your takeaway? What's the nugget for you today? There's probably a lot, but pick one that might help Michael have a sense of your core nugget, your little piece of gold that you're taking away. For me, it really goes back to the comment I made earlier, which is the notion of elegance in organizational change. That we have to bring elegant frameworks forward that help people kind of make practical what they're trying to do in such a complex, sometimes elusive experience. Change is elusive, it's complex, and particularly on a large scale, which is what you specialize in. And so I think the elegance of your framework is my takeaway today.
Yeah.
Others out there? Some people have said, like Jillian says, task force, the task force concept as an intermediary for delivering the unvarnished truth is her takeaway.
Very good.
Yeah.
Well, that's a methodology to enable a conversation. It's all about conversation, open conversations.
Embedded learning and reflection is important.
Yeah. When David asked about, or Steve asked about who are leaders in our field, and your answer was some leading companies, my thought is that we should be closer in studying the truly effective CEOs of the companies that are making the changes and bring them to us as leaders. Help publish their thoughts for sure, but maybe we're overlooking a whole galaxy of people who are using thought to make powerful change, but it's coming out as an organization.
Right. Right on. So
more
I think
of
that's
those
an
folks.
interesting.
HBR does a bit of that, but they don't do enough of it.
That's definitely a perspective that bubbled up today that I think is a great point that you're making, Dave.
Yeah.
Anybody have anything else they want to say before we say goodbye? Because Mike's been working hard today. You've been working hard.
Can I add one other thing? I think everything I've talked about leads to one key question. Who are we promoting as leaders? Who are we selecting, promoting, and developing as leaders? It's the leader is a key to this, and the ability to deal with the truth, with things that you don't agree with or you don't know anything about. Humility, vulnerability are not people who are often selected as leaders. I think we underplay that.
Yep.
I think it's a good closing thought. Thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of the day. Michael, I look forward to circling back and chatting with you later. And everybody, again, have a great day.
My pleasure. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.